Hello and welcome back to the Hazzabhajan YouTube channel. It is Harry here, and today it is time to delve once again into the crazy world of football transfers, but this time around I'm only looking at transfers which, by football standards at the very least, are relatively cheap. With the hyperinflation of transfer fees in football over the last 30 years or so, and especially in the last decade, it is becoming almost impossible to unearth hidden gems on a cut price deal, as players who probably would have been worth £5 million 15 years ago would cost in excess of 20 million and perhaps even 30 million nowadays, and so trying to get incredible players for a fee as low as £5 million in today's market is extremely rare. That doesn't mean to say it's impossible though, and for today's video I decided to go through each Premier League team's transfers over the last 10 years dating back to 2011 and find their best signing who cost equal to or fewer than £5 million. But just as a quick disclaimer, I am not including loan deals and nor am I considering free transfers. There has to have been some money involved in the deal for it to qualify for this video. If you'd like to watch a similar video to this but without any limits whatsoever, then I have made one looking at each Premier League team's best signing over the previous 10 years dating back to 2010, although of course that was the Premier League roster for the 2020-21 season, so it doesn't include Norwich, Watford or Brentford, and it does include Sheffield United, West Brom and Fulham. But if you would like to watch it anyway, I will leave a link to it in the description for you to check it out. But for now, let's jump into the bargain end of football transfers and see what I think was each Premier League club's best signing for under £5 million since 2011. Arsenal, Rob Holding. Rather frustratingly, Gabriel Martinelli cost £6 million when he signed from Ituano in 2019, otherwise it would have been a slam dunk for the Brazilian starlet who, should he avoid injuries, could become an Arsenal legend over the next decade if he stays for that long. With him disregarded, it comes down to a rather underwhelming choice between either Colombian goalkeeper David Ospina or English defender Rob Holding, both of whom have become memes for various reasons on social media. I think the right decision is probably Rob Holding, given that Ospina did have quite a few occasions where he looked very shaky and was error prone in between the sticks, whereas Holding has been a solid if unspectacular rotation option in the Gunners' back line since 2016, when he transferred to the club from Bolton, becoming a first choice for the most part of last season, although I don't think he is, or ever has been, the long-term answer to Arsenal's defensive problems. Aston Villa, John Mcginn. Despite Aston Villa's poor record of deals in the transfer market over the last decade, there were still a few options for me to choose from, including Conor Hourihane and Ron Vlaar. My choice, however, is John Mcginn, the dynamic Scottish central midfielder who was snapped up from Hibernian in 2018 for £2.8 million. Mcginn has, when fit, been one of the first choices on Dean Smith's team sheet ever since his arrival, only missing one game last season and playing a key role in Villa's promotion back to the Premier League in 2019, their survival push after lockdown upon returning from a broken ankle, and their rise up the table to 11th last campaign, and its energy and drive have been pivotal to Villa's recent resurgence. So all things considered, he's a pretty obvious selection. Brentford, Saïd Benrahma. Premier League new boys Brentford have, in my opinion, the third best crop to pick from in the entire league, with the likes of Rico Henry, Sergi Canos, Neil Maupay, Andre Gray and Saïd Benrahma all having been bought for fees under the £5 million threshold. It is an extraordinary hallmark of the club's exceptional recruitment policy that so many great signings, either in terms of sell-on value or overall contribution to the club, or indeed both, were made for a pittance in today's market. But in the end, I decided to go for Saïd Benrahma when all factors were taken into account, but only just. Signed in 2018 from Nice for just £1.5 million, the tricky and pacey Algerian winger immediately became a first-team regular, hitting 10 goals in his first season before increasing that tally to 17 in 2019-20 in a free-scoring side that ended up losing in the playoff final to Fulham and being voted into the Championship Team of the Season. West Ham then snapped him up, originally on loan but then permanently in January 2021 for a fee that could rise to £30 million subject to add-ons, and whilst Brentford were promoted after he left the club, a 20 times profit isn't bad going at all. Brighton, Glenn Murray. In the future, and perhaps even after the end of this upcoming season, the answer will most definitely be Tarik Lanti, who was signed from Chelsea for a measly £3 million in the winter of 2020, and after really impressing in the first half of last season and increasing his transfer fee exponentially, Brighton will make a huge profit on him should he make a full recovery from his hamstring injury that has ruled him out for over 6 months. Right now though, I can't look past Glenn Murray, who returned to the club in 2016 from Bournemouth, originally on loan, before a £3.1 million permanent transfer in January 2017. Despite being aged 33 at this point, he fired home the goals to win Brighton promotion back to the Premier League for the first time since 1983, before hitting 10 plus goals in 2 consecutive seasons to help the Seagulls consolidate in the top flight, leading the line brilliantly and causing many headaches to Premier League defences with his hold-up play, clinical finishing and ability in the air. Of course, he did slow down from 2019 onwards, and after a loan spell at Watford last season, he retired in the summer just gone. But for what he did to the club between 2016 and 2019, he has to take the crown for now, although of course, as I said earlier, Lanti will surely overtake him before too long. Burnley, Nick Pope. I was going back and forth with Burnley for quite a while because you could very feasibly pick the likes of James Tarkowski for his star quality, Ashley Barnes for what he's contributed to the club since his arrival, and Michael Keane for how much profit he made the Clarets when he moved to Everton in 2017. Plus of course their captain Ben Mee, although as his fee was undisclosed, I decided not to count it. In the end, I went for Nick Pope because quite frankly, Burnley really unearthed a gem when they signed him from Charlton in 2016. Although it took him a year to make himself first choice at Turf Moor, an injury to Tom Heaton in 2017 saw him come into the side, and, aided by a solid defence as well, he only conceded 35 goals in 35 games, and after being a rotation option the following campaign, he has gone on over the last 2 seasons to become one of the best goalkeepers in the league, even being voted into the PFA Team of the Season in 2019-20, and winning a few caps for England. Not bad for £1.1 million. Chelsea, Ethan Ampadu. It turns out that Chelsea don't really do cheap signings that well anymore, because I had a crop to choose from that included the likes of Papi Djilabodji, Michael Hector, Matt Miazga, Christian Atsu and Christian Cuevas. Basically, people who Chelsea shoved in their to-be loaned cupboard for a number of years and then sold on, without having made an impact at the club. I could possibly have gone for Djilabodji, not because of talent, but because Chelsea somehow managed to double their money on him when they sold him to Sunderland in 2016, despite him not really being very good. But in reality, the only viable choice is Ethan Ampadu. The Welsh defender has been sent out on loan by the Blues a few times, including to RB Leipzig and to Sheffield United, with whom he was relegated, but he could potentially come good at Stamford Bridge over the coming years, provided he gets enough game time, although aged 20 and with fierce competition in his position at the moment, and with Chelsea in the market for a new centre-back, specifically Jules Koundé of Sevilla if the rumours are to be believed, it could be that he may be moved on to pastures new before too long. If that does happen though, Chelsea will make a lot more than the £2.5 million that they spent on him back in 2017, which will represent a financial success for the club, but also potentially ruin another player's career before it really started, something which they have grown accustomed to doing a lot since 2003. Crystal Palace, Wilfred Zaha. Last year, I put Wilfred Zaha down as Palace's best transfer of the last 10 years, so it would be a bit stupid and hypocritical not to pick him here, given that his fee was in the region of £3.5 million, although an extremely honourable mention must go to Yannick Bolasie, purely because they sold him for 50 times what they paid for him in 2012 from Bristol City, and got the best years out of him before he became an injury-riddled winger whilst at Everton. Zaha has been Palace's best player for the last 6 years, almost single-handedly keeping them away from danger at times and proving a menace to Premier League defences with his pace and trickery on the ball, although his finishing has been somewhat inconsistent throughout that time. Whilst he has been quite overtly angling for a move away from Selhurst Park for many years, and Palace have perhaps missed the chance to see £70 million come into their bank accounts by now, given that Zaha is 28, he has become a club legend ever since his return in 2014, originally on loan, and then in 2015 on a permanent basis from Manchester United. Everton, Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Annoyingly, Seamus Coleman's £50,000 move to Everton took place in 2009, meaning that it falls 2 years outside of the allocated bracket, so the candidates are whittled down to John Stones, Mason Holgate, and their prolific striker Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Holgate has really come into his own over the last couple of years, especially under the guidance of the now departed Carlo Ancelotti, and Stones earned them £50 million when he was sold to Man City in 2016, but Dominic Calvert-Lewin may well be the long-term answer to Everton's striker problems should he stick around for a long time, so as such, I've gone with the former Sheffield United marksman. Bought in the same window as Stones departed, but for just £1.6 million, Calvert-Lewin, who is an absolute menace in the air, took a while to settle in at Goodison Park, but has hit 13 and 16 goals in the last 2 Premier League seasons respectively, and if he stays, he could be the figurehead of the club's transition into their new stadium over the coming years. Leeds, Stuart Dallas. Leeds' current captain Luke Cooper, their right back Luke Ayling and Matthias Klich are all worthy of mentions, although realistically I didn't really need to go with anyone else apart from Stuart Dallas. The versatile Northern Irishman has probably played in every single outfield position for Leeds apart from at centre back, and although his primary positions are either at full back or on the wing, you probably wouldn't be able to know that if you watched him at all last season, given how much grass he covers game by game and how capable he is at switching positions at will. One of the players who has responded best to Marcelo Bielsa's pressing system, Dallas was a regular feature prior to 2018, but he only missed one game during Leeds' title-winning 2019-20 campaign in the Championship and wasn't ever present as they finished in 9th on their return to the Premier League after 16 years away, scoring 2 famous goals against Manchester City in a 2-1 win at the Etihad. Leicester, Jamie Vardy. Without a shadow of a doubt, Leicester City have the best players to pick from, and choosing between Riyad Mahrez, Jamie Vardy, N'Golo Kante, Kasper Schmeichel, Wes Morgan and Johnny Evans was headache-inducing, but I decided to go with Vardy after much umming and ahhing. Vardy has really stated claim for being Leicester's greatest player of all time ever since his move from Fleetwood Town in 2012, when he became the first £1 million non-league player in history. He has been worth every penny to Leicester and then some, as he has hit 118 Premier League goals for the Foxes, winning the Premier League Golden Boot in 2020 and scoring in a record 11 consecutive games during Leicester's title-winning 2015-16 season, when he scored 24 goals in the league alone. Whilst he could have left like Leicester's other title-winning heroes such as Kante and Mahrez, he stuck around and ensured that his legacy at the club is untouchable, so on that basis he has to clinch it, but as a result of the competition that he has left in his wake, only just. Liverpool, Joe Gomez. I almost had no other choice for Liverpool other than Joe Gomez, as my other options were Ricky Lambert, whose dream move to his boyhood club quickly turned into a nightmare, and Ragnar Klavan, who may well be a cult hero at Anfield, but wasn't exactly the greatest defender of all time. Far from it, in fact. That's not to criticise Gomez at all, as he has been a solid defender whenever he's played, but his problem has been chronic injury setbacks that have plagued him almost ever since his arrival at the club that have prevented him from getting many consistent runs in the first team. However, he was a consistent feature in their title-winning campaign in 2019-20, putting in great performances throughout the season as he cemented his place as the first choice to partner Virgil van Dijk, although with the purchase of Ibrahima Konate from RB Leipzig, his place does look somewhat under threat right now. Manchester City, Oleksandr Zinchenko. Much like with Chelsea, most of Man City's signings under £5 million have been farmed out on loan on multiple occasions and seen their career prospects slide down the nearest drain, and 2 of the options that actually went straight into the first team are Mcginn, who was poor, and Martin Demichelis, and the less said about him, the better. However, there is one shining light that came out of the dross, and that man is Oleksandr Zinchenko, who managed to somehow avoid being sent out on loan at all by Pep Guardiola, and instead made an incredible transition from being an attacking midfielder into a pretty solid and capable left back. To say that he is quite possibly City's strongest player in that position says a lot about not only the club's recruitment for the left-back slot, but also how much he has impressed on many occasions whilst playing there, and although he can be let down sometimes by a lack of concentration, his defensive nous has grown in the last few seasons to the point where he seems really comfortable now when deployed at left-back, so whilst there is virtually no other choice for Man City, Zinchenko is nonetheless a good one. Manchester United, Alexander Butner. Yet again, as would perhaps be expected with the big clubs, Man United don't really do bargains all that well, and the only choices I had were Alexander Butner and Lee Grant. Genuinely. I think that Butner just about takes it on the grounds that Grant has literally been brought in as a third choice goalkeeper and has made just 2 appearances for the Red Devils, whereas Butner at least played a few more games and made a small impression at the very least whenever he played. Brought in to be a potential replacement at left back for Patrice Evra in 2012, Butner was dangerous in attack but suspect when defending his own goal, and after a half-promising debut season, Sir Alex Ferguson's retirement in 2013 led to him being shunned by new manager David Moyes and then sold by Louis van Gaal in 2014 to Dynamo Moscow for a very small profit. He now plays for RKC in his homeland of the Netherlands. Newcastle, Jamal Lascelles. Thankfully, there are a lot more players to pick from for Newcastle United, as Martin Dubravka, Johan Cabaye and Jose Perez are all in with a shout here, albeit the latter almost solely because of the £40 million they recoup for him when they sold him to Leicester in 2019, but I think that Jamal Lascelles has to take it. Lascelles has been a solid force in the Magpies' backline for the last 5 years whenever he has been fit, as well as being the captain of course, and the defence looks much more solid when he is a part of it. His leadership qualities and commanding nature always give his fellow defenders much more assurance, and whilst under Rafael Benitez's guidance, Newcastle were in the top half of fewest goals conceded in both 2017-18 and 2018-19, with the Lascelles playing a major role. Norwich City, Emmy Buendia. Diminutive Argentine playmaker Emmy Buendia has recently been purchased by Aston Villa for a club record £34.5 million, meaning that Norwich sold him for 23 times more than what they originally paid for him back in 2018 from Getafe, which was £1.5 million. He was thrust straight into the first team and immediately sparkled with his tricky wing play, agile movement and creative ability, helping the Canaries to win promotion to the Premier League in his debut campaign, and in December 2019 he laid on 29 chances for his teammates, the most ever recorded in the Premier League in one calendar month. Whilst he couldn't prevent Norwich's relegation, his reputation was not diminished in any way, and after 15 goals and 16 assists last season as Norwich won another championship title, he was voted as the league's player of the season, leading to Aston Villa securing his signature this summer. Honourable mentions go to Ben Godfrey and James Maddison, but I can't overlook Buendia's contributions to the club, and he will be extremely difficult to replace. Southampton, Nathaniel Klein. I always thought that Nathaniel Klein was a product of the prolific Saints academy system during the mid-2000s to the early 2010s, but as it turns out, he was signed from Crystal Palace in 2012 for £2.9 million, and with that in mind, he takes the crown as the best player that the Saints have signed for under £5 million in the last decade. It could be argued that Southampton got Klein's best years out of him as a pacey and defensively astute right-back, and barring the 2013-14 season, where a few minor setbacks hindered his campaign, he nailed down the right-back slot during his 3 years at St Mary's, helping the club finish 7th in 2014-15 and qualify for the Europa League. His form saw him snapped up by Liverpool that summer, and after 2 solid seasons with the Reds, he suffered a back injury that kept him out for most of the campaign, and a young star called Trent Alexander-Arnold emerged in his place, rendering him surplus to requirements at Anfield, and he is now sadly a free agent, having left Crystal Palace last summer. Tottenham Hotspur, Eric Dyer. I originally thought it was Dele Alli who was the right answer to this question, but it turns out the Spurs paid £6 million as opposed to £5 million for his services back in 2015 from MK Dons. So as such, it comes down to 2 people who played key roles in England's 2018 World Cup run to the semi-finals in the forms of Eric Dyer and Kieran Trippier. As much as I would have loved to have gone with Trippier, he spent his first 2 seasons at the club as backup to Kyle Walker, and his final campaign at the club in 2018-19 wasn't exactly his finest. So on the balance of things, I probably have to go with Dyer, albeit very reluctantly. A versatile player who can play in defence or midfield and always seems to turn into prime Paolo Maldini whenever he plays Manchester City, Dyer has come under fire on social media for his sometimes erratic displays in recent times, but during his early days at the club, he was a regular fixture and did impress during Spurs' title challenges in 2016 and 2017. Watford, Ben Foster. Joao Pedro may be the correct choice in the next few years should he really come good on his promise, but I've decided to go with one of the most likeable figures in football in the form of Ben Foster, although his open personality isn't the reason why he gets the nod here, as obviously he is a great and criminally underrated goalkeeper. After being relegated with West Brom in 2018, Foster returned to Vicarage Road for his second spell with the Hornets, with his first having come on loan from Manchester United in 2006-07, when he was famously, or infamously, beaten by fellow England goalkeeper Paul Robinson from the other end of the pitch. He immediately became the club's number 1, putting in a load of impressive displays to help keep the Hornets in mid-table in his debut campaign, and although he did concede 12 in 2 games to Man City in 2019-20 and Watford went down, he did have to deal with a quite shoddy defence and ballroom and managerial instability throughout much of the campaign, but was still able to maintain his relatively high standards. He was a rotation option with Daniel Bachmann for much of last campaign as the Hornets won promotion back to the Premier League at the first time of asking, and the cycling goalkeeper will hope that he can retain the number 1 jersey ahead of what may well be his last campaign in professional football, given that he is now 38. West Ham, Aaron Cresswell. I think Aaron Cresswell doesn't often get the recognition he actually deserves, as whenever I watch him play, I'm often really impressed by him, either with his dynamism down the left-hand side or as the left-sided centre-back in a back 3 with his defensive nous. With that in mind, and despite stern competition from Craig Dawson given his displays last year, since Cresswell's £4.2 million move from Ipswich all the way back in 2014 obviously qualifies him here, I have to go with him. Cresswell has played over 250 games for the Hammers, including making over 35 league appearances in 4 of his 7 seasons with the club and winning their Player of the Year award in his debut campaign, and his form between 2014 and 2016 saw him win 3 England caps, although with stern competition in the full-back areas, he hasn't won any more since 2017. Wolves, Juan Moutinho. With our final inclusion, Wolves, there were only really 2 options, but they are 2 outstanding players in the forms of Conor Cody, a long-term servant to the club and indeed the captain of the club, who has worked his way into the England squad off the back of some really impressive performances, and Juan Moutinho, who was brought in for peanuts from Monaco and has shown his vast experience and class in the centre of the park alongside the more industrious Ruben Neves. I really don't think that either of them are the right or wrong choice, if that makes sense, but if I had to pick between them, I would just sway towards Moutinho, considering his arrival at Molineux in 2018 for just under £5 million was met with shock amongst the football community as to how they managed to lure a Euro 2016 and Ligue 1 winning midfield playmaker for such a small fee, although he is Portuguese, which probably explains everything, to be honest. He has missed just 5 league games in 3 years, being ever present in 2018-19 and 2019-20, and was voted as Wolves' Player of the Year in the former season when they finished 7th and qualified for the Europa League, and his ability to keep things ticking over in the middle of the park has added some much needed guile to Wolves' midfield. And that just about wraps up today's video, looking at every Premier League team's best signing under £5 million in the last decade. If you disagree with any of my choices, let me know which ones you would change down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and ring the notification bell to get notified whenever I upload a video straight away. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you then.